But there was a 2016 study when the speed limit went up to 80.
Correct.
Yeah, that said that the proper speed limit through the Bozeman part of the interstate should be 75. Is that right?
That's correct.
And so how's that determined? What are the factors that go into figuring that out?
Well, by state law, we're required to do what's called an engineering study. And what we do is we go out and we collect data, that data being the vehicles traveling through that area, what percentage of trucks are going through there, recreational vehicles, that type of thing. And they also look at the number of crashes that are occurring and the types of crashes that are going through that particular area. And so that was done back in September, I think, of 2016. And a recommendation was put together to go ahead and put that at 75 miles per hour, lowering it from the 80 miles per hour that was legislated in by the legislature the year before, I guess, or the session before anyway.
The guys in the fire department especially, but also police, and I think Gallatin County had 2 cars hit on the interstate this year, are saying that they believe that it's a safety issue after you have an accident, that your first responders and then other cars on the road, that having those higher speeds is more dangerous at that point. Do your studies take that into account at all?
You know, I'm not sure that whether they do or they don't. I don't know. There's a process that our traffic folks follow in setting those and collecting the data. Whether or not it's after a crash or before a crash, I know they look at crashes, but whether or not I'm just not for sure on that. I think our plan is to find out what the local governments are going to ask us to do as part of that, whether they want to redo an engineering study or whether they want us to set up a temporary speed limit, which I've heard, but I don't know if that's happened or not. But we're gonna get the recommendation from the city and the county, and then kind of put our heads together to determine do we update the engineering study that's been done and make a presentation back to the Transportation Commission to look at that, or there's other options, and we'll follow that when we get closer to actually being asked what we want, what the city and the county want us to do.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any feelings or opinions about what the emergency services people are saying about the danger to them and their folks out there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, our folks are out there very much doing the same thing, and picking up deer, litter, and what have you. It can be very dangerous when you're out on a highway where vehicles are traveling at any rate of speed. The trucks right now are required to be at 65 anyway. That's the speed limit through there, and then vehicles can go 60 or 75. And so it's that differential is, and that's by state law. That's where we're required to do that. Kind of adds to part of the issue associated with safety out there, and especially when you're in an emergency situation, because they're trying to take care of the lives of those individuals that might be involved in that problem, why they're stopped out there in the first place. And so their safety is number one in our mission out there for the department anyway.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that could be a big factor for you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's the interesting part, that 85th percentile. If everybody's driving 75, you can make the speed limit 35. Traffic isn't going to do that. That's a benefit to law enforcement. It becomes an enforcement thing at that point. Yet these are the folks that are asking you to. It's kind of a weird dilemma that you have. Your study is to try to help law enforcement so they're not having to constantly camp out there. If you made the speed limit through Bozeman 35 miles an hour, that would be nothing but an enforcement deal for them.
Absolutely.
But yet they're asking you to bring that speed limit down, which effectively means they're asking you to potentially make it more work for them, because they're going to have to enforce that new speed limit. Right. I think that's an interesting deal that's coming out of all of this.
Well, there's we call them the 3 E's: engineering, emergency, and well, there's actually 4, but education of, you know, how people should react and drive down the highway. And, you know, when you have one of those entities not participating, it makes it tough. And so, you know, we try to get the word out that through our public service announcements that, you know, following the speed limit is appropriate when you're in a certain area. And in this particular case, like I say, they were traveling at 75 miles per hour, and if you set it too low, then you can have it become a speed trap. You can actually. We had a situation down in the Gallatin Canyon, which when it was 55, when it was reasonable and prudent, and when it was set at 60. And the numbers showed that when it was safest was when it was reasonable and prudent, where there was no speed limit. People just drove what they felt was comfortable. That's what the data showed in that particular region of the state. Whether it would show up here on this or not, we can certainly and probably will look at that, because we've had the crash statistics back in 2006 when the study was done then, and the time now we can update those numbers this time around, and still see if there's been an increase in crashes since it's been 75, or if there's actually been less. We won't know until we pull the data and see what happens.
How long will that take?
Typically, what typically takes us the time is to actually go out there and collect the data that's happening at that particular time. But we also have we also do data collection that is somewhat behind. In other words, right now we're working on the 2017 data, whereas the 2018 we're not up to that speed, or up to having all that. We'd have the first like 2 months of 18 to look at as far as data, but it would be something we would be looking at as part of that engineering study, because we have a study now that was done in 2006 and another one that sounds like is being requested for 2018.